So Elizabeth's coming up here to join me. I'll just say real quick. This song that we're going to do was actually introduced to me in Spanish by students of mine. We were in the Dominican Republic before we came here, and I used to teach a class where I organized these corral the cats into a worship team. Some of the students introduced this song to me, and we took it and we translated it to English, and we used it at our church, and so we thought it would be one we'd want to share with you this one. All right, yeah, so as I was saying, some of my students had introduced me to that song, and it's been really meaningful for us, and so we wanted to bring it out again, and we recently translated that. Am I supposed to just miss kids, or is that? You're good. Okay. That's what kids are. When I see kids running, do I need to run too? Yeah, so they introduced that, and we love that song. Very beautiful. Reminds me very much of Jesus with the Samaritan woman at the well, giving the water of life. We wanted to share that. So I just wanted to say, first off, thank you again for having us. It has been a long while. I did not think it was going to be this long. We actually were here January 12th of 2020. I know this because I looked it up, not because it has been burned in my mind forever, but that was when we were here. We were at that point just about 2 months away from heading to Philadelphia. It was great to speak here. I know probably a lot of you are thinking back to, like, do I remember that? I'm not sure. Some of you might remember a story about a table, and if so, the table's fine. I just want to let you know that. If you guys don't remember that, it's okay. It's probably the best. At any rate, so then we head up. It was March 2nd, I believe, we arrived in Philadelphia. This is 2020. We came to an extended stay in Plymouth Meeting, just outside of Philadelphia. And we came and we led worship. Here, can you try and work out a signal with the slides? Is it like, yeah. All right, so that's my kids there at the zoo. Yeah, go ahead and flip to the next one. So, I guess I got them out of order. Well, let me just show you real quick. So here we got, this is Center City, Philadelphia. You can see, what was that, Liberty Hall, right? With the statue of William Penn on it. You can see it down the street here too. We don't spend a lot of time in Center City, but it is quite beautiful. Yeah, go ahead and flip to the next one. Here we are. This is rare we got to do this, but we had a team come visit us, and they took us to a Phillies game. And so there's my son with me at a Phillies game. He will tell you that he loved it, he loves baseball, but that look on his face is pretty much, I think, how he felt. It's kind of confusing, but then my daughter and I, we also got to go to a Sixers game. That's kind of a little more my style. My mother-in-law gave us tickets for her birthday, so we got to go out there. It was really exciting. You can see the team there, it's just like little ants on the court, but it was really wild, it was really cool. But, sorry, go to the next one. So here we are. So we arrived, and at that time we're meeting at a middle school, Indian Northwest. Actually, my daughter goes to that school today. It's about 2 blocks from where we live now. At that time we were meeting in here, so we came and we led worship the very first time. This was on the 8th of March. The very next week, everything in Philadelphia shut down for COVID. We were across from a mall. I looked out in the parking lot Sunday morning, and there were almost no cars in the parking lot. We had no idea how long this was going to last, and actually, I'll get to it in a second, but we never led worship at this building again, so that was one time there. It was very exciting. So we, at this point, we've got no jobs lined up. We had done some support raising. We didn't have as much as we would need. We knew we were going to need jobs, and we didn't have housing lined up yet. We were in an extended stay. And everything at this point is shutting down. People are not certain how long it's going to last. Businesses are worried they're not going to be able to make money. And so people are pretty concerned, and it's in a lot of ways probably the worst time to go looking for a job. And it turns out one of the worst times to go looking for a house. We had a place set up. The realtor had set up. He was going to show it to us. A whole bunch of people, it turns out, were going to come that day. He canceled. He called and canceled everybody, but he forgot to call and cancel to us. So we just showed up at the house, and there was nobody there, and it got real awkward. And a neighbor had his realtor's license, so he's like, "Hey, I can show you the house." So he made a few calls, got the key, showed us the house, and we're like, "Oh, this is really great," or whatever. Well, it turns out, since everybody else canceled, nobody else was interested in the house. We were the only people. At this point, we're showing up. We got no income on paper, or very little income on paper, and it was really extraordinary that the landlord was even willing to consider and eventually rent to us. And so God lined this up in a really strange, perfect way. But at any rate, I skipped ahead a really crucial moment in this process. So we're at the extended stay. We're faced with this. And we decided, hey, we need to send out a newsletter to our supporters and say, hey, please pray for us about this. We need employment. We need housing, right? There's no way that we're going to be able to do this. So we sent it out. The very next morning, Elizabeth got like, I don't know, a few different calls about jobs, I believe. 2 job offers within a few days. It was just a few days later, I got a call back on a job, and then, like I said, the house was lined up, and it was incredible. It was overnight. So I would just say, I know a lot of you were part of that get the newsletter. If you don't, please talk to us. We want to get you signed up. But the prayer was extraordinary, and that's been the most crucial thing, is that people are supporting us, they're praying for us. And that's been huge, and God is working through that. So, yeah, please keep praying for us. It's so powerful. So, yeah, so, we're starting to get things lined up there, but we're still facing, all the confusion that every church is going through at this point, which is, how do we continue? What do we do? A lot of our churches they've never live streamed, they've never dealt with technology. Some people are good with technology. I'm scared of technology. I'm afraid of this thing strapped on me right now that I just pulled up. So, that was quite a curve. One thing that's really different about being in Philadelphia than a lot of other places where, here where you can go down the road and you see churches everywhere and they're well established, is that every church in Philadelphia is like a fledgling. They're all struggling to survive. And there are so many people out there that need to be part of churches that there's not this sense of competition, there's not this sense of protecting our turf. And so it was really wild. Our pastor is good friends with a lot of the other pastors, and 2 of the other churches, he got together and said, hey, why don't we all get together and do these services together? So we thought it was just going to be, a week or 2, flatten the curve, if you remember that expression. We thought, hey, how long can it take to flatten a curve, right? So we started getting together, and it was really, really, really cool, because all the worship pastors from the 3 different churches, we got together and formed a little team. We meet once a week, and the pastors would rotate preaching the sermon, and it was really, really cool. Now, both these churches were Presbyterian churches, but it really, it just doesn't matter. We were committed. We're going to work together. We're going to preach the word. We're going to make sure that people can see this. So I actually, when I was in the Dominican Republic, one of the things I did is I was a video editor. And I got to the point where I was so tired of doing video that I had made a decision I wasn't going to let anybody know that I actually knew how to do that. And I was just going to pretend that I didn't know. And so literally, we're in, 2 weeks into being here. They need somebody to edit the video. And it's like, so it turns out that that's going to be me. So God has a great sense of humor with doing that. So I found myself editing this. They would do it. We'd film it, I believe, on Wednesday or Thursday. And I'd have to go home and throw it together real quick or whatever to load. And it was taking like 5 or 6 hours to load it online. It was just this extraordinary nightmare. But it was a really wonderful opportunity. And what's really interesting about that relationship is we moved into a new building, and we're currently sharing a building with one of those churches. Actually, jump a slide. I think it's this next one here. Yes, so it's a really strange picture of us rocking out outside. We were doing a block party, I remember. But you can see the building in the background. It's a really, really cool old church. But they were meeting Saturday evenings to do their services. So we get to run a space Sunday morning prime time from this church, and it's really worked out well. There's been some odd, quirky things with the relationship, as you can imagine, sharing space. But we share equipment, we share the building, and it's been really cool. So it's just a really different environment, but a really encouraging one. Sorry, let me try to get back on track. I got this all written out because there's no telling where I'll go if I get too far off of this. So yes, so we partner with church. Here we go. Okay. So go ahead and jump to the next slide. We gave you the geography lesson on Philadelphia, and I'm the wrong person to give geography lessons because I've made some recent discoveries. I didn't know anything about geography. So we're in the Roxborough neighborhood. Oh yeah, I can step away. I forgot to get the microphone. So this orange shape in the top left corner. So this is like northwest here. That's Roxborough. To give you kind of a point of comparison, I looked it up. Manayunk, which is the light blue right below it, it's about from tip to tip there. The longest is about 2 miles. Okay, so that you'll see that in a minute. It's hard to get bearings on this, but we're in Roxborough. Philadelphia is not broken up into boroughs like New York, like you would think of, Brooklyn and things like that. It's all Philadelphia. There are neighborhoods, but it's very informal. It's not like on paper is the case. And actually, even Roxborough, people will break it up. Like over one part is Wissahickon, and one part is Endora. But at any rate, these neighborhoods, while they don't exist formally, they're huge in terms of people's identity. You're outside of Philadelphia from Philadelphia.
Inside, you're not going to say you're from Philadelphia. You're going to say I'm in Roxborough, I'm in Manioc, I'm in, I don't know, Germantown, something like that. So we're up into that spot just inside of Philadelphia. Sorry, let me see where I was going with that. So right to the south there, that blue spot I said was Manioc. Manioc and Roxborough kind of get grouped together. They're usually like Roxborough, Manioc, that kind of thing. Manioc, just to give you kind of a quick snapshot of what it's like there. The river right below Schuylkill, we had a really, really bad flood this last year. I mean, it was, Manioc was really low. It was like under feet of water. We had a team come in from a church we knew. They came to our service, joined the service, and they're like, we're going to go down, we're going to offer to help clean up from this flood. So they got down to Manioc, down by the river, and they got here and they're like, hey, we know how to do this, we'd love to help out. You know, we're from this church. And these people in Manioc, they go, okay, you're from a church, you want to help out. We don't need any help, thank you. When they're like, you're underwater, you need to rebuild, this is like whatever. And they're just like, no, we don't need your help. So they ended up going out of the town to a nearby Conshohocken, which is kind of a suburb of the town, and they gladly welcomed the help. You know. But that's the kind of climate here. People are not really interested in opening up and getting help. They're really friendly people generally, but they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want help, and they definitely are very cautious around religion. The area is mostly like nominally Catholic, but the Catholic churches are actually closing their doors. There are fewer Catholic churches here now than there were even a decade ago. So people have largely made a decision to turn their back on it. So we'll come back to the map in just a second here. I can figure out where I am. Yes, go ahead. So Watershed Church, this is our logo here. Easiest way, so when I was coming in and wanted to talk to you about what we're doing in Watershed Church, there is so much going on, so many different parts and like that. I thought the easiest way to break this up, and this is what I use a lot, is to break it up into interior, what I call interior ministry and exterior ministry. So go ahead, jump. Interior ministry. No. There we go. Internal. Sorry, I said interior. Internal. So this is where Elizabeth and I are primarily at. The worship, the preaching, discipleship that's done internally, and then our outreach to our immediate neighborhood. So that's one area I'll talk about in a minute, but is really proving to be the most difficult is how do you reach out to your neighbors? Like I said, they're not even willing to let you help them rebuild. Yeah, so here's a good one. I've got, one of our service projects we did, is go around the schools and clean up trash. We've been building relationships with the schools. There's a lot of complexity there because most of these schools bring in students from other neighborhoods, and they're not always really welcome in the community. There's some complex relationships. They like to go in the street and start fights and things like that. And so there's a lot of tension there. But at any rate, okay, so I said the internal, external, outreach, training, and church planning. So here's where it gets real interesting. We're less involved with this, but it is something we are involved with. So jump one more slide to this map here. So as I said, we're Roxborough and that orange. If you see this dark red area, East Falls, so like kind of right to the, what is that, southeast, is okay, but it's starting to get a little more questionable. The sort of blue, I guess I can just step over here and point. Right here, Nicetown, Tioga, and then below it, North Philadelphia. These areas are considered to be the worst, by a lot of people, the worst in the city, the most dangerous, the most neglected, some of the poorest. That's about 3 miles away from us. Everything in the city works different in terms of traveling. So, we stayed an extended stay in Roanoke, probably 15, 20 miles, I'm not sure. That doesn't feel far here. But in the city, driving 3 miles takes you probably 20 or 30 minutes. And going street to street is a very different world. You'll have a street of people, very nice houses, a lot of upkeep, and then one street over, it's like burned down, graffiti everywhere. It's dramatic, the shift. But this ends up being really, God has put us here in this specific place for a reason. He's put on our hearts to begin doing outreach and plant churches in neighborhoods. So in North Philadelphia, the light blue right below it in the top corner, there's an area called Strawberry Mansion. It's kind of a subset of that. And it's considered to be one of the poorest, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And the Southern Baptist Church wants to see a church planted there. There is virtually no church presence in this neighborhood. It's been neglected by the city, been neglected by the cops, been neglected by churches. The few that are there, very small, very ineffective. Most of the doors have been shut. And so they found out, this is something that's on their hearts they want to do. And our pastor said to our discipleship director, Dan Towner, he said to him, that's where I want you to go. I want you to go there, get on the ground, meet people, pray, begin discipling people. Our goal is to see a group form there of disciples meeting regularly. So when it's time to church plant, they're already going to be there in that neighborhood. Right north of it, in that blue area, there's a little section called Allegheny West, and the same thing. One of our church members had a real heart for that neighborhood and believed the Spirit was directing him. It's the same thing. They go there, they meet people, they build some relationships with people, meet with them regularly and pray. Our belief is that, particularly in these neighborhoods, so when they go out to these neighborhoods, people see them and assume they're cops. That's the only white people that come through. They look, especially the more plain you try to look, the more you look like a cop to them. So that's the assumption. So people are very skeptical. So the way that these groups are going to form and the way that this is going to happen is because people are going to hear the gospel from people they know and feel safe with, not from us. So what we believe is we're going to go in there, we're going to meet some people, we're going to find people that are either there, that God's already put there, or that are there and they're receptive. And then we begin to share with them and we begin to equip them. And then they've got their circle of people that feel safe with them. And so then it's introduced to their circle. And then in their circle, those people can become equipped and to go out. And so our goal is to see this whole city reach for Christ. It's about 1.5 million people. As I said, these are the poorest, least represented areas, but still, by and large, there is not a huge Christian presence. Certainly not Protestant, but even as I said, among the Catholics, it's not. There's really very little interest among most of the city. So that's our goal. Also, we've gotten involved, as I said, we work with a lot of the churches in the area. We've got a lot of established churches. They're not big churches, but established. They've got their congregations. We have been meeting with a lot of them, doing trainings and encouraging them, hey, God's calling you to reach out too, right? So we can only do so much, but if we can encourage these other churches to see that as their job to go out and to reach, God can do extraordinary things, and He can do things much quicker than we may feel. So we believe He's calling us to that, to see this whole city transformed, but one tiny step and tiny piece at a time. So we've got our internal ministry to Roxborough, because we want to see that. We believe God's given us that, and we need to minister that, and we need to minister to our members. But then we also want to see that spread out and step by step reclaim that territory that is under Satan's dominion for the town. One last thing I want to mention about this. So I talked about this with neighbors. We have another group that goes out to this area, Kensington, which is it's a little bit over and down this yellow on the coast. Some of you may have heard of this. I was actually speaking to somebody about this recently, just yesterday, and he knew the name Kensington because he's seen it in the news. I really hate this term. I'm going to use it because it was in the news, but it bothers me that people did. But in the news, in the media, they were calling it zombie land. And the reason is there are so much drugs, and it's so open that these people are going there, they're getting high, they're buying, they're getting high right there, and they're just wandering around the streets in this stupor. And it's become this huge issue. So they go out there, they meet with people, they pray, they give out, things that people need, supplies and stuff like that, food. Right now, that's where it's at right now. There must have been some sort of informal strategy to let it, consolidate in this neighborhood and just ignore it. But the residents have obviously been complaining. There's a lot of negative media. So they're going to go through and clean out this park and push it all out. Now, it's going to go somewhere. That's not going to solve the problem. So we're trying to figure out where that's going to happen. But at any rate, there's an incredible, tremendous amount of need. And we believe that God's called us to meet that. So, like I said, a lot going on at Watershed, but hopefully that begins to give you a picture of that. Go ahead and jump another slide here. So this little girl, her name is Isabella. She is about a week, 5 days, so less than a week within the age of our daughter, Hannah, who's giving her a hug there. They live in Strawberry Mansion, this really very, very poor neighborhood, some sort of like government housing type thing. We've had a chance to get to know them. They were one of the people early on. They met in the neighborhood. They've come to our church quite a few times, build a relationship. It is so complex. I can't even tell it. I always want to be careful too, because certainly don't want to like exploit too much of her story. But it's just a really tremendously different situation. Her mother, Elizabeth, it just was very, just the kind of knowledge that we take for granted of a mother caring for their child and things they know. She just didn't have that. She didn't have it herself. Her mother didn't have that. Just generational. And it's been really, really difficult and sometimes very eye-opening. I mean, just things that, she would ask, like, oh, so Hannah likes to play, like, goes out on the swing, like, how did she learn to swing, and things like that, the things that you would just take for granted. And yeah, it's just been a great opportunity. Anyway, I wanted to just kind of throw that story real quick. So going back now to the ministry that we're most involved with, internal, we began live streaming our own services less than 2 years ago. So we were involved with these churches. We did that. It started off, we thought it would probably be 2-3 weeks, like Gilligan's Island, like this 2-hour tour kind of turned into like a lifestyle. We're 3-4 months into it, and we're like, okay, this isn't going away. Maybe it's time that we learn to do it on our own. So we moved into that new space, and we began live streaming ourselves. And at that point, there was Elizabeth, there was me. Whoa, I got to stop doing this. And there was one other person. That was the music. And so we initially started that way. It has been it's been about 2 years now since we started doing that. We now have 12 people in our rotation, 12 different musicians. About half of them are youth. My daughters both are involved in music. Actually, you can see my oldest daughter is back there playing the guitar, looking. If you could see the expression on her face, she doesn't like being photographed. So, at any rate, so yeah, about half of them are youth, learning the instruments, or they know to some degree, and they're learning to play. And then there's our pastor there. I don't have a lot of pictures of the members of the church, I'm sorry, but playing saxophone. We pulled that out for Easter. But yeah, all of a sudden my problem, and this is not something, we're not going around actively recruiting musicians. This is God bringing these people in. It's been really wild. We had people, that saw online, watch the services, and they just show up. So we're doing all kinds of outreach events and connecting with people. And we need to get a little bit right. But then God is bringing in people that we don't even know, that have no connection to the church. They see it online. They're like, hey, we love the sermon. We want to, there was a lot of that. We had a lot of people join that way. So now, again, expanded to 12. My biggest issue week to week is like scheduling. Like, how do I keep people involved, but I can't have 12 people on stage. So that's been a surprising issue to have, but it's been really cool. Sorry. Yeah, so in the church itself, right now we're running at an average service of about 30 to 50 people, something like that, some bigger than others. I was thinking about it when I was preparing for this. Looking around, about half the people I see every Sunday morning have joined the church since the pandemic began. So one of the things that we run into is we know churches that church plants have completely failed. We know permanent churches, established churches that closed their doors during the pandemic forever. People are struggling, churches are struggling, and God is bringing in people to our church. It's been really, really exciting, really wild. There were a few people that I thought about, like, oh yeah, but when I actually started thinking down, like breaking down who was there every Sunday, I started realizing, wow, so much has happened since this began. So it's been really exciting. So if you think about it though, between 30 to 50 people, we got 12 musicians. Our youth, when I'm about to jump, so you can jump forward, we've got about 8 to 10 that we normally regularly meet with. So this is like a really huge number for such a small church. It's been really cool how God has brought us in. But we started doing events in October of 2020, going to the pumpkin patch, where we were doing these game nights in this top corner. I always had this propensity for really weird, strange games. So I came up with this idea. They're not allowed to use their hands, and they've got their cell phones, and they have to call a number. They're competing, like, who can dial it first, like a hostage situation or something like that. And they did. I mean, they got down, and they were, like, dialing with their nose and stuff. It was really interesting. But yeah, we started doing these game nights. We had rock climbing. It was a huge success. We've done that twice. Initially, when we started, we had about 12 or 13 kids coming to the event, which is really, really cool for a small church. But most of it, we had about 5 or 6 that were youth at our church, and these were mostly friends that attended school with them. As it went on, more and more, the numbers would stay the same for the events, but all of a sudden, it's all kids that are internal to our church. So whereas before it's like 5 or 6, and then all of a sudden it's everybody, it's people that are regularly attending. Jump a slide. The most recent event we had was we went to an escape room. We're watching the numbers. Nobody's really registering. Nobody's registering. The last day, all of a sudden we've got 14, 15 kids. Some of these kids that used to, came to events a year ago, all of a sudden out of the blue, they're coming again. We've got all our regular people. We've only got, 15 spots in the car, right? And so I'm looking at it and I'm like, please, 15, let's stop. I don't want to try to deal with getting more kids. And 1 minute before we shut off registration, 2 more kids signed up. So all of a sudden we're like, we don't know how to get the kids there, we don't have enough vehicles. And so we had to, I spent all afternoon calling people and begging people to drive and stuff up. We did it, we managed. My 2 girls got lost on the way. We didn't have a way to reach them, that was scary, but they eventually made it there. So everything was fine. But we got there is the point, and it had a great time. So yeah, here is that event, the escape room. They had a wild time. They were in the parking lot running figure 8s afterwards. It was crazy. Really, really cool. Great opportunity to get to know all these kids. And we've also started, we have something that's called neighborhood group. And it's kind of similar to what most churches do, a small group. It's meeting outside of the church. We broke it up. Initially, it was when we first got there, it was all these families, all these kids, and it was wow, it's so much for one house. And I told them, it was I think we need to split this up. We're not going to get new people coming in. So we split it up, and that's immediately happens. Both of those groups grew really quickly once we split it. So I think it's going to be splitting again soon. But we've got the one that meets on Sunday that we're a part of. That is, we've got about maybe 8 to 10 youth that are part of that. And then it'll be their parents and their young siblings. And it's probably 15 to 20 people in terms of the parents and siblings. Meeting in one of our church members' houses. He's luckily got a fairly large house. Most of us don't have large houses in Philly. So he's got a fairly large house. So we meet there, eat, and then split up. But even that's getting overwhelming. It's kind of hard to bring new people in. But it's been really cool to be able to meet with the youth on a one-on-one. Because that's where I feel most comfortable. Sitting down with them, teaching, got my whiteboard, that kind of thing. That's where I've had the most, just great conversations. A lot of these kids are, just coming from very different places. Most of the kids in our church are probably attending some sort of Christian school, but they're being confronted with just the reality of the decisions. They're going to be graduating soon, and it's the reality is this is the faith of my parents, but is it my faith? So it's great to be able to meet people. Meet them where they're at, and that's been really good. We've only started doing that really in the last year. We've been comfortable meeting and doing it that way, and that's been really, really profitable. So we are really excited about that. So let's see. Yep, I officially. Go ahead and jump slides. Oh no, that's way too far. Okay, so I'm. Yep, so I talked about neighborhood groups. So, having said that about breaking up the missions, they're all really interconnected. It helps me to think that way, to think internally, but ultimately our goal is to see the whole city reached. And you're going to do that by building up your own church members, obviously, edifying, teaching them, building them up, sending them out. Got a really high level of involvement in the individual members of the church. More easily, probably 3/4 of them are willing to go out. They're willing to pack bags. They're willing to go and talk to people on the streets. We've got, as I said, a significant number willing to get up to lead music. So that's something we want to see is a high level of involvement. We want to see people taking initiative on their own, not just waiting for us to lead, but seeing that and saying, God's got this desire in my heart to do this. And so we're seeing a lot of that's been really exciting. The church, it's about, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. They'll tell you, there have been ups and downs. Sometimes the membership's gotten 50, and then a month or two later, it'll drop down again. People move in, people move out. But this has been, even if it's not the largest number of people regularly meeting, it's been the strongest core group in terms of their dedication, and they're willing to serve, and they're willing to obey the Spirit and say, what does God have me do? I want to go out and do it. I want to get involved. So it's been really exciting to see that happen. And again, we do we are praying, we are desiring to see the whole city of Philadelphia transformed. And, it's a massive job, but we believe that God's got some small part of that for us, some small but really crucial part of preparing people to go out and teaching and equipping. So we're really excited about that. In preparing for this, I wanted to go ahead and also share something from God's Word. And I was praying about it, and I wasn't really sure, what way it was going. But there's a particular passage of Scripture that the Spirit had laid on my heart earlier this year, from Revelation chapter 2. You're going to put the slide up, but I didn't really know why at the time. And I'll be honest, I don't really completely know why now, but it feels really significant, and there's a lot of connections being drawn. And so I felt the Spirit saying, to lean into this, to look at this, This is actually not what I'm going to speak about and preach on this morning, but it leads us to that. So I just wanted to start with that. And in Revelation chapter 2, 2 and into 3, John is being instructed by Jesus to write these letters to these churches. And some of the churches, like the Church of Philadelphia, get very well commended. It's not us, but I'd love to think that it was. But other churches, there are correction that needs to be made. And this one is for the church of Ephesus. And Jesus begins by commending them. You have stood strong in your faith. You have held up the doctrinal standards. You haven't compromised your beliefs. And he commends them for that. But then he says something really shocking in verses 4 and 5. It says, "But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, repent, and do the works you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent." So my takeaway from this, go ahead to the next one, is that a lack of love is disqualifying to a ministry. This was really shocking to me to realize. I definitely come from a background that emphasized the doctrine, emphasized the teaching, preserving against the culture. But to realize from this passage, wow, not only is Jesus going to say, if you don't have love, you're compromised, or you're not as effective, or you're not doing as much as you could. He's saying, I'm going to shut the doors of the church if you don't return to that love you once had. It's so overwhelming to me, so shocking to me. And I remember being just very impressed by that earlier this year. And it actually connected to a passage that the Spirit had impressed upon my heart the year before. The pastor was preaching on love, and he was preaching on 1 Corinthians 13. And Paul begins that passage talking about, if I do these extraordinary things like speak in the tongues of angels, or perform miracles, or give my body over to be burned, and just these dramatic things. And he's like, if I don't have love, it means nothing. I benefit nothing from them. And that was my takeaway, thinking about these passages, is wow, a lack of love is disqualifying. If you are running a race, and you put forth all the effort, and you've done the work, and you run, and everything's going right, and you're perfect, but you do something that disqualifies you, that's it. And that's what, John and Paul and Jesus are communicating here. It's this is enough to disqualify us. So I don't know exactly why the Spirit has laid this on my heart. I certainly don't feel like our church is lacking in love, but it's something that he put on me, and to take that seriously, and to take that in my ministry, because, we're making sacrifices, we're doing this. To waste that would be just horrible. I just think it would be the worst thing in the world to make all these sacrifices, to devote yourself to it, and then to let yourself be disqualified. So the only analogy I could kind of come up with is, other than running, is just thinking if you were a surgeon, and you had a procedure that you did, and you were very knowledgeable about this procedure, and you had worked hard, and you had studied, and you were skillful, and you were all set, right? But you don't sanitize the equipment. You don't clean the wound after all, as the incision. And the person dies of infection, right? It's disqualifying. It doesn't matter how good. Now, it does matter in a sense how good we are at those things, because they are commended on this. And it's important to realize we do have to contend for the faith. We do have to support that. So I'm not saying all that. Just in the same way as the surgeon needs to be able to have that skill, right? Because if I go in there, it doesn't matter how much I sanitize the equipment, the person's going to die. Okay? So yes, those things are crucial, but you can't forget the step. It's going to disqualify you. So in preparing for that and thinking about it, there were two questions that came to mind in thinking about this. Go ahead to the next one. The first question was, when he says, return to your first love, is that first love for God? Is the first love for one another, or is this both? Right? So that's my first question. And then the next one was, what are the works of love he calls us to return to? So he actually said, let's see, let me get the actual quote here. Oh, right on my page. And do the works you did at first. So I thought, what are those works of love? And where is that directed? And I felt the Spirit calling to mind a passage from Matthew chapter 25, verses 35 and 40. I hope you guys can read that. If not, I'm going to read it, so it's kind of small print. So Jesus is preaching here, and he says in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 35, he says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you? Or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me." So, kind of an unusual approach I'm going to take here today. I'm not trying to understand the whole chapter of Matthew 25, or even sort of the context this fits in. What's interesting to me is just this one little piece that I think is a building block for that larger meaning. And that is how Jesus has framed these acts of love that these people have done. Now, some of you might be looking at the passage and saying, I noticed that it doesn't use the word love at all. Like, why would this passage come to mind when we're talking about the works of love? So, I think that there's some really good evidence that the motivation here is love. I have a pastor friend who is always fond of saying, he would say, people value sincerity. So if you can fake that, you've got it made. And in the same way, when you look around the world, you're going to see a lot of people doing a lot of really good things, right? They're going to give from their own personal wealth. You're going to see them making grand humanitarian gestures and giving selflessly. And Jesus speaks about this behavior in Matthew 6. He says, these people are practicing their righteousness before people. And he calls them hypocrites. And he says that they have received their reward in full. Okay? They're not there because of the work of Jesus. They're not there for an eternal reward. They're not there because they love the people. Maybe they feel a little bit of that, but the main reason is they want people to see them giving, right? In this passage, you have the Pharisees praying loudly, or they were going out and ringing the bells and letting people know, I'm doing this, I'm giving this money. And Jesus warns against that, okay? So what we see in this passage, first of all, is that Jesus has specifically chosen, you can go ahead and jump. Yeah. How do we know these are acts of love? Jump. Okay. First of all, they're humble acts. He's specifically chosen acts that are very, very simple. They're very quiet. Nobody's going to get commended for giving a cup of water, right? Clothing the naked, caring for the poor. These are things that if people are willing to do, they want to do it on a grand scale. They want to do it on a large scale with this group. They're not interested in the individuals they do this to. Okay? So Jesus has specifically chosen this. Not that there are no other acts of love, or that some acts of love aren't bigger or more sacrificial, but he's chosen ones that are small and that a lot of times maybe not huge sacrifices necessarily, right? Jump to the second one. We see these individuals are not doing this for a particular reward. How do we know that? Because they're surprised at being rewarded. It hasn't really occurred to them that this may be in service of Jesus, right? They're surprised. They're like, when did we do this, right? I just gave somebody water that was thirsty. I just fed someone who was hungry, right? So these people are not doing it for that reason. Now, I do want to say, Jesus commends us, seek out spiritual reward, seek out heavenly reward. So, having that target in mind, having a spiritual reward in mind is not bad. It's not wrong, right? But these people, they're not heroes because they didn't know this. It's just evidence that they weren't thinking about that. They weren't thinking, I'm doing something. They're thinking, you know what, this person has a need. I love this person. I need to serve this person. Okay? And then lastly, we see that they're spiritually rewarded. So going back to Matthew 6, Jesus has said, these people who are doing it for show and it's empty, that's their reward in full. They got it all. Right? They're not getting a spiritual reward. So when Jesus in this passage says, hey, you get a spiritual reward for having done this, he's saying, in other terms, this is because you did it for love. Because you did it out of love. Okay? You did it honestly, not for show. Okay? So, if you're with me so far, if you agree that, yes, it sounds like that they're doing these out of love, then I do want to point out one thing that we haven't picked up on already that is just really extraordinary in this passage. Jesus doesn't say to them, I am so praising you, I'm happy with what you did, because, these people, it shows that my love. Right? It's true, he does, right? But that's not what he says. He doesn't say that, he doesn't just commend them like, I'm glad you were willing to do that, right? He says, when you did these things, you did them for me, right? They didn't know they were doing that, but he doesn't say like, I was happy you did that. He says, thank you for giving me the water. Thank you for giving the food to me, right? He identifies completely with the poor. He identifies completely with these people. And so that when that's done, it benefits him. Okay? And he is the recipient, and we're serving him directly, which I think is really incredible. So I did want to just highlight that. As a worship leader, obviously people's love towards God is really important, right? I want people to love God. I want them to worship, and I want them to respond to God in love and live in true worship. So this is really, it gets my attention to say, hey, people are loving Jesus directly by doing these acts of service. Right? This is really encouraging to me. So I did want to bring that up. So just kind of to wrap this up, hopefully, just want to look at three things from this passage. Jump forward. Yep. First of all, these actions are actions that the world considers small, done for people that the world considers insignificant. Okay? That's one of the common themes in this list that Jesus has chosen. Again, he might have chosen many other things that people do. There are obviously many other things we do out of love. But he's chosen this list specifically to highlight these are small, and they're done for people that the world considers insignificant. Now, comparing that to 1 Corinthians 13, Paul wants to make the opposite contrast. So his list of things, are these huge things, speaking in tongues and giving yourself to the flames and making sacrifices, because he wants to say, look, you can do these grand things and it's meaningless, right? And Jesus is saying, look, you can do these tiny things in love and they're meaningful, they have value. So there's this great contrast between those two passages you can see there. Next, I want you to see that we love Jesus by loving the people he loves. I think the best way that I can understand this and thinking about it is the way that a family works. So in a family, it feels like a lot of times, I've got enough kids that I get confused about how many kids I have. I often think that there's somebody missing when they're all there. It can feel like when you're paying attention to one child that you're neglecting everybody else. But the secret about families is that you love your spouse when you love the children. Like, I love my wife when I'm loving my kids. And I love my kids when I'm loving my spouse. And that's exactly the picture you see here. When you love these people that Jesus loves, you are loving Jesus. And when you love Jesus, you will love these people. So I want to see that interconnectedness. And lastly, I just wanted to, there's no loving without doing. Two other passages that came to mind when I was thinking about this. 1 John 3:18, John implores people who's writing, it says, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. And then James 2:15 and 16 came to mind. James said, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things they needed for their body, what good is that? Right? There is no loving without doing. I have used the phrase loving and serving. Like most times I've been using that, loving and serving deliberately. But I think that, at least for me, God is saying, you know what? Those two words need to be treated as synonymously and as meaning the same thing. Because there is no loving without serving. I can't love someone without serving. And there is no serving, there's no real true serving without loving someone. Okay? And I feel like, so this has been maybe a little odd this morning, and I think one thing that's been off about it for me is that this isn't something where I can say, God gave me this 2 years ago, and I saw it play out, and I'm thinking about it, and I want to share it with you. This is something that I feel like God is working through me, and the Spirit is directing me, like right here and now. And I feel like, weirdly enough, that part of that process has been preparing this and sharing. preparing and sharing that with you right now. And so something that I'm still kind of working through and I don't really understand, but I do feel that God is really saying very clearly to me and maybe to some of you, do not allow yourself to get so busy and so concerned about these things that you neglect loving your brothers and loving me. That's disqualifying. And again, I'm not feeling that right now, like, oh man, I'm doing that, like convicted in that way, but I feel like, God is leading us in a direction, hopefully to see this whole city reach, and it's, He's saying, He's laying that groundwork, He's saying, man, you need to be involved in the acts of love now, and 2 years down the road, when you're busy and you're distracted, you need to still be involved in those acts of love. If at any point you realize, man, I've become focused on these other things, you need to go back to that, right? So one of the things that's been a real challenge to us in our neighborhood, I mentioned real briefly, Manny, the situation where they didn't even want help rebuilding after the flood. And it's been, God has been, it is so hard to find out your neighbor's needs in Roxborough. Honestly, you guys might encounter that some here. I feel like when people have a lot, when they're doing okay, it's hard for them to share their needs. It's hard for them. We were speaking to some friends. They had some church members that the guy he's very healthy, very active. He and his wife run this farm and they do it all themselves. And he was struck with this crazy illness in his brain just out of nowhere, and it knocked him down. Just one moment he's fine, and now he's in a hospital. And the members of the church have been filling in for him, and it was extraordinary to hear this story. I mean, they don't know what they're doing. They're going out there and they're following the directions, but they can't tell the sheep apart from each other and all that stuff. But they're willing to serve, and it's so encouraging. I love seeing that. But one of the things my wife was saying about them, and she's like, they've done this all themselves for so long. It's not easy for them to admit they need help or to share what they need. And these aren't people that are like a lot of people we're dealing with. They know Christ. They've been doing this for years. But it's just when you feel like you got it, it's so hard to share your need with other people. It's so hard to be open. And it's hard, everything that I said, loving without doing. You've got to be able to meet needs in some way to share love, right? And so finding out what our neighbors' needs are, that's been a real huge challenge. And, we were talking this morning about what can you all pray for? Please continue to pray for us, our ministry, our finances, our family, because it can be really stressful. Anybody who's involved in ministry can tell you. I mean, kids, you can try your best, but they tend to bear a lot of the weight, unfortunately. So all those things. But in terms of ministry, I think the single biggest thing in my heart is pray that God will show us the needs in our community, where we can minister, where we can meet people. Our discipleship director, he was finding that he was going out trying to talk to people in Roxborough. Most of them, they didn't want to be prayed for. They didn't want to share with it. But the people who were working at the gas stations, they're coming in from other neighborhoods. They were more open. They were more receptive. They were willing to say, "Hey, I've got a sick, child," or I've got this, issue myself, and they were willing to be prayed for. There is definitely a vulnerability that comes from being poor, from being disadvantaged, that makes us more willing to entertain the gospel and to share and to be vulnerable. You don't see that in a lot of these neighborhoods, So that's been on our heart. We've had a lot of people join our church. Most of those people have a church background. They need the church desperately. They've benefited tremendously, and we're able to minister to them. But we really want to connect with people in our neighborhood that don't have a church background, or they have, a Catholic background way back in their childhood, and we want to bring them in to understand the real relationship that Jesus wants to have. So that would be the biggest thing I would ask for you to continue to pray for us, certainly for our family or individual situation, but also pray that God shows us the needs and how we can love the people in our neighborhood and how they can be receptive. Because I believe that's where things are going to really begin to change in our immediate neighborhood. And then, certainly, as I said, thank you so much for the financial support you guys have had for us. We're still very much relying on that. Thank you so much for the prayers. That has been huge. God has done extraordinary things and provided for us, and continues to do so in very unexpected ways. Not only the way that we think that it's going to happen, but it's always been so encouraging. So thank you for that, and
thank you again for having us here. I just want to go ahead and close this time out in prayer, so if you pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for these people, Lord. Thank you that they are contributing and doing works and doing the acts of love, Lord, for the race cars and the hats that they were talking about this morning, Lord, to give. Lord, thank you that they are excited about missions and the work you're doing, Lord, that they're supporting us in our mission and our work. Lord, I just ask you to bless this church. I just pray that everyone here, Lord, that you would lay someone in their life on their mind, Lord, somebody that has a need that they can reach out to and they can meet that need and they can share, Lord, and that they would desire to see their families and their neighbors and people around them that either aren't interested in church, Lord, or maybe are attending a church somewhere, but they're not really sold out for you, Lord. They're not really excited about that, Lord. That you would lay it upon people's hearts to say, hey, I want to share this with you. I want to show you what God's been doing in my life. I want to tell you about what you can have here, Lord. So just pray that for everybody, Lord. Just convict us of any areas where we have been lacking in love, Lord, where we either are indifferent or we become overzealous about certain aspects of the ministry, Lord, that we've done that at the expense of sharing it with us, Lord. I do pray that, Lord, that this church and that my church and that my ministry, Lord, that we'll all continue in that first love, Lord, that you've called us to, ministering to one another, serving you, Lord, just everything that you've called us for, Lord, that you prepared us for, Lord, and that we would see the world transformed for you, Lord, that we would hasten the day of your return, Lord, through the sharing the word and the preaching of the word, Lord. And I just ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.